A feud over the Fed. The Trump administration now turning to the nation's highest court, asking the Supreme Court to allow President Trump's firing of Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. The emergency request comes after a federal appeals court in Washington, D.C. rejected the administration's bid to lift an order stopping President Trump from removing Cook from her position over accusations of mortgage fraud. In the meantime, the White House continues to push for bigger rate cuts. Here's senior counselor Peter Navarro.
We're 100 basis points at least over where we should be. That's disequilibrium. It hurts our trade balance. It hurts everybody who's trying to get a mortgage. It's frozen up the housing market. Powell has been a disaster. People talk about an attack on Powell as an attack on Fed independence. It's not. It's Fed incompetence.
Okay, two separate issues here as far as I see it. You've got the Lisa Cook issue, and then, of course, you have what has the Fed been up to and how have they been coming to the conclusions that they have under Jerome Powell. So let's start, Brianna, with Lisa Cook. And the fact that charges have not been filed against her. She's been investigated, allegations have been made, and some defenses have been made from her team as well. The president says he has the ultimate power to fire her. If he fires her for cause, it should stand, and that we really shouldn't be having a court battle over this. Others say there were different options. Powell could have said, listen, until formal charges come, we could suspend you. She could have, sort of recused herself or resigned or stepped back temporarily. None of these things happened, and so now we landed in court. Your take on it?
Yeah, and I think you make all the good points. The first is the appearance of impropriety at that high of a level is concerning to people. The Fed is not some small institution. It is an institution that helps us determine the market, economy. It makes investors feel weary or not. So there should always be an appearance of everything going correctly, even if she is not guilty. That being said, of course, she deserves her day in court. The other problem is it's not even so much as whether she's guilty or not. It's whether President Trump reserves the right to fire her with or without cause. The Federal Reserve Act is very open and broad. They never narrow down what that cause is. And if judges can determine the cause, I think it's up to either Congress or someone else to actually make those specifics. Otherwise, you have a judicial supremacy situation. I think that's what the Trump administration has been arguing with most of these court cases.
And it is important to note that the judge in the federal appeals court was a Biden appointee. Yeah. And so there could be some bias there. We've discussed that. Brian, we'll take this out a step further before we get to the cutting part and where rates are right now with Lisa Cook. We had a conversation with Charlie Gasparino this week, and I know that the DOJ always tries to bring cases that it thinks it will win. It's not going to waste its time to bring a case it's not going to win. That doesn't make sense. And so while they're looking into this to figure it out, the claim could be made by Lisa Cook that she made a mistake.
Yeah, she could.
Right?
I mean,
that there was nothing nefarious going on here.
Yep.
The intent aspect of this is very, very difficult to prove when you're trying to get to the bottom of what was in somebody's head.
Yep. I agree with that. I don't think, and we talked about this in the first hour, I don't think you need charges to be brought here to say that somebody could be fired for cause. I don't think charges are a prerequisite to that. There's nothing in what I've read that says that. To me, I'm not a lawyer. We do need, I'm glad the Supreme Court's going to take this up I think they should take it up because we need to know two things. We do need to understand what cause means, okay? I think this ambiguity in cause is a huge problem. If we're going to have cause in the language, if it's not at-will employment, and it manifestly isn't if they write cause in there, then you got to know how broad or narrow cause is. And I think we also have to know what is the process by which somebody establishes cause so that they can let somebody go. I sympathize with the Trump administration. I think a lot of the American people for looking at these Fed governors who get appointed and they think that they are entitled to that spot. And I think Lisa Cook has done herself damage reputationally by the way that she's responded to this. That doesn't mean she doesn't get process. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't define cause, but I don't think she's done herself any favors or the Fed any favors by acting like she is indispensable to that institution and that institution's independence. She is not.
It's almost a sense of entitlement to the position. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. Lydia, I'm curious where you stand on the issue of cause. Some could argue, the president would argue, just the fact that we're having this conversation and mistakes were made on the mortgage applications regardless of what the intent was, that's a bad look for the Federal Reserve.
Right.
As somebody in that position should not be making mistakes like that.
Absolutely. If you're going to be so negligent as to make inconsistent statements in your own mortgage applications and those types of documents, what does that say in your handling of serious economic and fiscal matters before the Fed, right? What does that reflect upon your decision making? I will say, the decision that is being, the assistance that is being requested from the Supreme Court at this juncture is specifically the question of whether Lisa Cook can remain in her job at the Fed for now, while the larger question, the larger litigation about what does cause mean plays out in the lower courts. And on that particular question, while they're deciding whether or not they're even going to weigh in, there have been kind of conflicting opinions from the Supreme Court. But most recently, there's been an interesting one from Chief Justice Roberts, where there was an FTC commissioner that was removed from her job. And they said, you know what, that's fine. You can be fired from your job for now as this continues to play out. So we'll see if they decide that is actually the status that needs to be applied to the Federal Reserve. There are some other decisions that have been issued recently, particularly a case called the Wilcox case, where the court said the Federal Reserve is by nature, by creation, supposed to be its own special independent entity, which kind of goes back to this idea that these Fed governors, we may not like them, but when they're appointed for 14-year terms deliberately to maintain the independence of the Fed. And
independence.
Independence.
I'm so glad you said
What a curious word.
It's like our $1,000 pyramid word.
Yes.
So it's come up. And Gary, I want to pivot topics on this and get your feeling on not so much Lisa Cook, but the Fed's independence and where we are at this moment in time. We just got a 25 basis point cut. The president has been saying, you're too late, we need to cut sooner and sooner. The Fed is actually hinting that it will give us 2 more 25 basis point cuts this year. We'll get 75 basis points by the time we're done. Powell has maintained his position that he's worried about inflation rearing its ugly head, and that was the justification behind the decision making. Your thoughts?
Okay, well, first off, full disclosure, I've been the biggest yapper against Powell for many years. I am a big believer that he created the inflation with asinine printing to $9 trillion, taking rates to 0%, leaving them there, watching inflation that he created soar, then sit there, him and Janet Yellen saying it was transitory. And by the way, the housing problem right now emanated from Mr. Powell, just so you know, because of the distortions of the 3% mortgages. He should have been fired back then. I don't understand how failure can keep a job. I believe he's probably number 1, number 2 financial person in this world that gets to keep a job that had been so wrong for so long and created all kinds of problems. As far as right now, I'd be another half point below here. I would have done it a few months ago. It would not have harmed anything, regardless of what I think of tariffs or not. To be at 3.5% when the 10-year yields at 4.25 is a no biggie. It's not going to create a job. It's not going to kill a job. So I do believe he's behind the curve as usual. He will be playing some catch up right here, but I'm going to use that line again. Be careful what you wish for, because he just lowered rates, but rates are going higher.
Right.
The 10-year yield has moved up, and mortgage rates in the last 3 days have gone higher. And that is because I believe the market is saying, well, he doesn't care about I'm not saying there's big inflation, but all of a sudden the Fed doesn't care about inflation. He's looking the other way. So the people in the bond market are doing some selling right there and accounting for all that. Whether that plays out poorly going forward, we'll know in due time. I do not want to see right now 10-year yield go above 4.5 or higher at this point in time.
Nobody does, including the president. But it's interesting because our conversation shifted from the firing of Lisa Cook to the firing of Jerome Powell, and it started with the $1,000 pyramid word of independence. So, Brianna, I want to come to you. Independence in the Fed is important for it to be able to function. At the same time, what are the checks and balances in the system when somebody isn't doing their job, or there really is partisan politics being played, which you could argue happened here, to remove that person? You can't just say to somebody, here's a blanket term position, you have it no matter what you do or how you act or how you decide that you're going to govern, you get to stay where you are.
Yeah, and I think that question has been called into higher scrutiny given that they finally cut the rate just now, because Donald Trump has been asking for this for months. And what this rate cut admits is that Donald Trump was right about the economy when Jerome Powell wanted to pretend he's not. And for months we've heard that his tariffs would cause inflation to go higher. That never happened and never materialized. And so it does bring into question whether Jerome Powell was making his decision based on policy and what the economy was doing, or based on the hypotheticals we got from the left-wing media and Democrats who tried to gin up all this hysteria and possibly, stop Donald Trump on the road on his success to the economy.
Yeah.
But, can I say one but?
Final word.
The initial tariffs were outrageously high, and if he kept that, that could be a big problem. I give the president credit and Becenta a credit for pivoting pretty quickly when they saw what could possibly happen. And guess what? A good leader knows when something's amiss, and they move to a different...
Well, to your point, the bond market gave them the impetus for that.
Oh, yes.
So, they turned on the pressure.